The Weeping Walls of Ravenscroft Manor, a historical American ghost story. The House That Cried Blood. They say on stormless nights, when the moon hangs thin and cold over the marshes of Massachusetts, you can still hear the walls of Ravenscroft Manor weep, slow, dripping sobs that echo through the empty halls. Some say it's the rain trapped in the rotted beams. But those who have heard it, truly heard it, say it sounds too much like a woman crying for her children. No one has lived there since 1923, and no one ever will. The Manor in the Marsh. Eleanor arrived just as dusk painted the marshes silver. The mansion loomed from the mist, a dark skeleton of colonial architecture, its once white walls stained black with mildew and time. The locals refused to guide her closer. "Ma'am, that place don't stay quiet after sundown," said Mr. Amos Briggs, the stable hand who had driven her there. "Last feller went in there alone came out babbling about hands in the walls." Eleanor smiled thinly. Hallucination. The human mind is remarkably suggestible. Briggs crossed himself and spat into the grass. "Then may God help your suggestible mind tonight." The first night. Inside, the air was cold, unnaturally so. Her lantern's flame flickered, bending away from something unseen. The grand parlor stood exactly as the records described, an enormous hearth, portraits of Puritan ancestors glaring down from cracked frames, and a long staircase curling up into darkness. On the mantel sat a small wooden doll, its dress scorched black, its face carved into a silent scream. Eleanor noted it in her journal. Artifact, likely 17th century, child's toy. Burn damage consistent with early fire incident. See historical records of 1703. Possible psychological trigger for crying phenomena reported by locals. She spent the night in the East Wing, among the remnants of the Ravenscroft family bedrooms. At 2:17 a.m., she was awakened by the faint sound of dripping, like water leaking through the plasterboards. When she rose and turned up her lantern, she froze. A thin red trail was crawling down the wall, winding toward the floorboards. It wasn't water. It was blood. The records of the Reverend. The next morning, Eleanor examined the library, a cavern of dust and forgotten sermons. Behind a row of rotted psalms, she found a bundle of journals bound in cracked leather. The handwriting was precise, severe. The words, disturbing. March 1692. They whisper that my wife consorts with spirits in the woods. My daughters laugh when I speak of sin. I will drive the devil from this house even if it costs me all I hold dear. April 2, 1692. The little one cries when I burn the dolls. She does not understand. These are not toys, but vessels. The witching spirits must be purged. May 1692. The crying won't stop. Even the walls weep now. The house remembers every sin, every flame, every scream. Eleanor shivered. The Reverend's descent into madness mirrored the witch trials outside his door. She could almost hear the voices of that time, the hysteria, the confessions, the hangings. But what she could not explain was the freshness of the ink. The last entry looked as though it had been written yesterday. The visitors in the hall. That night, the manor came alive. Eleanor's recorder, an early phonograph, began spinning on its own. Static filled the air, and through the hiss came faint voices. "Mama, where's Mama? He's coming. Hide. Don't open the door." The temperature dropped. Frost formed on the inside of the windows, and from the hallway came footsteps, slow, dragging, uneven. Eleanor gathered her courage and stepped into the corridor. Her lantern caught the edge of movement. A small child's silhouette, standing at the far end, staring at her with hollow eyes. When Eleanor raised her light, the figure dissolved into smoke, leaving behind a small charred ribbon, still warm to the touch. The legend of the burning. Local archives confirmed what she had begun to suspect. In 1692, during the height of Salem's witch panic, the Reverend's wife, Martha Ravenscroft, had been accused of witchcraft after a neighbor's child fell ill. Josiah Ravenscroft himself testified against her, claiming he had found her communing with spirits in the cellar. She was not hanged. She was burned alive in her own home. Her daughters perished in the flames. Eleanor traced the property records. The foundation stones of the current manor were built atop the ashes of that fire, the same stones she was now walking upon. The crying in the walls. By the third night, the weeping began. It came softly at first, like wind moving through old cracks, then louder, sobbing, whispering, pleading voices bleeding from the plaster. Eleanor placed her hand on the wall. It was warm, pulsing. When she pressed her ear to the boards, she heard a faint rhythm, like a heartbeat. "Help us! The fire! He's coming!" The cries rose to screams. Her lantern shattered. In the brief darkness, she saw them. 3 pale shapes flickering like candlelight. A woman and 2 children bound together in flame, reaching toward her. The mother's mouth moved soundlessly, but Eleanor heard the words inside her skull. "He never left." The hidden room. Driven by both terror and fascination, Eleanor followed the sound of the weeping down to the cellar. There, behind a false wall, she uncovered a narrow staircase descending deeper into the earth. At the bottom lay a small stone chamber, perfectly preserved. In the center stood a wooden chair, blackened by fire, and the remains of iron shackles still embedded in the arms. On the walls, carved into the stone, were hundreds of tally marks, some drawn by fingernail, some by knife. And above the chair, in ash-darkened letters, "The devil took them all." Eleanor fell to her knees, trembling. But as she stared into the darkness, she saw something move, something still there. A man's silhouette, broad-shouldered, wearing the stiff collar of a Puritan preacher. His eyes were hollow pits, his mouth twisted into a smile. "It is a welcome to my sermon," he whispered. "The fire reborn." The lantern burst into flame. The entire room flared red, walls bleeding, air choking with smoke. Eleanor stumbled backward as the Reverend advanced, his form burning, melting, reforming. "Faith without fire is nothing," he roared. "I will cleanse this house again." Eleanor screamed, clutching the wooden doll she had found earlier. For a moment, the spirits of the woman and children appeared again, behind him, reaching toward her with desperate eyes. "Set us free," they cried. Eleanor hurled the doll into the fire. The flames exploded, swallowing the room in white light. The ashes of Ravenscroft. When she awoke, it was dawn. The cellar was cold and empty. The chair and shackles were gone. Outside, the manor stood silent, black smoke curling from its chimneys, though no fire burned within. Eleanor stumbled out into the marshes, clutching her journal. Behind her, the house groaned, a long, mournful sigh, and one final sob echoed through the air. She never returned. The university declared her research inconclusive, but the locals say that on quiet nights, when the wind passes through the reeds, you can still hear a woman's voice whisper, "Thank you." And sometimes, if you listen closely, beneath that whisper, you'll hear the voice of the Reverend, still preaching, still burning, still damning. Faith through fire. Epilogue: The Weeping Walls. In 1974, a team of renovation workers attempted to restore Ravenscroft Manor as a museum. On the third day, one man vanished. On the fourth, two others quit, claiming they heard children crying in the paint. When the foreman tore open one of the plaster walls, he found something that made him faint. 3 human handprints burned into the wood, 2 small, 1 large, pressed deep into the grain as if made by fire itself. The project was abandoned. Ravenscroft Manor still stands, shrouded in fog and silence. And sometimes, when the moon is thin and the air is still, the walls weep again.